So I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting us to present the status of Swiss wolf population in Switzerland. And I'd like to point out that most of the data I'll be presenting to you this afternoon is data from Cuneo, which is a Swiss institution with experts on large carnivores. So of course I'll be telling you briefly about monitoring, then the status of the wolf population, and a bit of the Swiss wolf management plan. So at a national level, we collect data, we gather data mainly from dead wolves, also from livestock that was killed by wolves, and then through chance observations. So chance observations can either be sightings, tracks, and of course wild prey remains. These biological samples are then used for genetic analysis, and mainly most of the analysis we carry out is on scats that are found in fields, but also saliva, tissue, hairs and regurgitations. And these are always collected when there are damages to livestock. And this is mainly done by the rangers in the field that are employed by the cantons. In some cases we also use opportunistic camera trapping. I'll come back to that later. Then at regional level we have also used howling. Hubert just explained to you how that works, so I won't go into details. And there the aims of the howling were mainly to see if we have any reproduction, to find out where the rendezvous sites of the packs are, and of course the core area of the pack. Now I have to say, so far we've only performed this method once on the ground packs, because up until last year it was the only pack we had in Switzerland. Also in the same region of the Calanta pack, which I should say is in the eastern part of Switzerland, we conducted transects in the snow, and the idea is to find out the minimum number of wolves, and of course, if possible, if there are scats lying around or urine, then to take samples for genetic analysis. And also this was only conducted in the Calanta pack because this is a very time-intensive method, and in areas where we just have like single wolves or transient wolves, it's too much of an effort for the cantons to carry out. And like the other presenters before me have explained, this makes only sense if you have snow. Well, it's only possible if you have snow, and which could be a problem in the future. Keeping in mind that snow is becoming more scarce, we have tried to figure out other methods for monitoring wolves. And in the map of Switzerland on the top, you can see it's not the black lines are not the division of the cantons. We have 26 cantons, but they are management units. We call them compartments for large carnivore management. And we have currently 8 compartments. Some of the compartments consist of just one canton. For example, the southern cantons, Valais, Tessin and Graubünden, they are each one compartment, and then we have other compartments of several cantons. And within each compartment, we have the blue reference areas you can see on the map that we use for camera trapping, basically for the monitoring of lynx. So this is a monitoring of lynx we carry out with the cantons. We also have very many volunteers in the fields, and the camera traps are out for 60 consecutive days in 3 reference areas per year. So basically we thought, well, okay, we've already got this very intense monitoring of lynx. Can we use this lynx monitoring to also simultaneously monitor the wolves? That was our first question. And if we can, what sampling has to be used to really be able to reliably monitor pack composition, so to determine pack size and breeding events. And the idea is, of course, for the lynx monitoring, we have to have a certain setup of the cameras in the field, and we wanted to see whether this setup was also valid for wolf monitoring. So we did this monitoring, of course, where we had the pack, and basically you can definitely use these camera trappings to determine wolf absence or presence, and also reproduction. But of course, one thing is very important to say, that the reliability of the methods to estimate pack size depends on 3 points. So first of all, the period. We carry out our main lynx monitoring in the winter, so usually from December till about March, when the lynx is most active. And this is also when wolves are active, when they disperse quite far. And then the material we use, we found that basically you need camera traps that are able to take a quick sequence of pictures. Because the quicker the sequence is, the more likely you are to kind of take pictures of all the individuals within the pack that they're moving together. And of course, you need to have the right setup. So you need to know from the experts in the field, which in Switzerland are the rangers, which sites or which places are used by wolves to kind of disperse or move along, or where do they mark. I'd like to tell you something about the status of the wolf, and before I go into that, I'd like to highlight where our wolves actually come from. So basically the first wolves we had in France were in the mid-1990s, and we took samples of the wolves that came after that and analysed them genetically, and it's clear the wolves come from this region here. So here we have an individual that in 98 came from Cuneo up into the valley. Then another individual in 99 dispersed from Vesuvi, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. And another one in 01 from Valle. So Valle is the main canton where the wolves were coming into from this area. And from there they dispersed into other areas of Switzerland. So here you can see the distribution of wolf observations in 2005, so that was 15 last year, and they have different colours according to scalp criteria. So the scalp criteria are basically criteria we use on an international level to determine the monitoring for lynx. So whether the data we get, C1 in the red points, are hard facts, which means it's basically a genetic analysis, it's a dead wolf, or so it's very clear it's a wolf. Then the C2 dots, the blue dots, are basically confirmed facts, so these are experts or photos. And C3, the green dots, are basically unconfirmed, not verifiable observations. And I should say you can see that basically most of the wolves in Switzerland are so far in the Alps. So the Alps extend all through the southern and middle parts of Switzerland. We have very few wolves in the Jura Mountains so far. So here are the wolves that we have genotyped, so genetically identified over the past 24 months. And in total we identified 23 wolves. And this is from December 2013 to December 2015. On the right you can see the green dots. This is the Kalander pack in the canton of Graubünden. The Kalander pack established in 2011-12 in the winter, and since then it has reproduced on a yearly basis. So last year also they had 4 pups, 1 female and 3 males. Then, for the first time last year, we also, in the Valle Morobia, in the southern part of Canton Tessin, we have the first pack there. And the red dots in the valley is the Augsburg pair, we call it, because it's basically just a female and a male moving together. So far, we haven't had any documented reproduction. Of course, we hope there will be. The other dots and triangles are in yellow, and those are basically single wolves. Some of them have established in areas and have been there for a long time, and others are just, sometimes they stay and then they move on. In total we have 8 females and 15 males at the moment. Of course it's clear, so far we mainly had wolves moving into Switzerland. Now with these packs, there are also wolves emigrating from Switzerland into the neighbouring countries. So out of the genetically identified wolves. 10 of those left Switzerland in the past 24 months, and you can see they are dispersing all over the place, kind of quite randomly. So we have the two arrows that are going to Baden-Württemberg, and then the green areas, they are going to Bayern, the Vorarlberg, Südtirol, but also in Trentino. We've had males emigrating. And then we've had one female moving to the Trentino and Südtirol. Some of these wolves that migrated, 4 of them have already been found dead. And some of the migration of the Calandre pack also occurs back to the valley. So they're not just emigrating to the neighbouring countries, but they're also moving around Switzerland. So I'd briefly like to show something about wolf reproduction in Switzerland. Like I said, the first reproduction was documented in Switzerland in 2012. And since then, we've had roughly on average about 4 pups each year. Also, like I said, the Valle Morobia, we've had 3 pups in the last year, and we hope they will continue to reproduce. So this graph, I'd like to show you the tendency of how the wolf population is growing in Switzerland. So the blue bars are the number of genotyped wolves, which is basically the wolves that we genetically identified on a yearly basis from 1998 to 2015. And you can see there is clearly, since 2009, there has been an increase in the amount of wolves that we genotyped that occur in Switzerland. And there are, of course, the red bars show the wolves that were genetically identified for the first time. So we are also having more wolves that we analyze genetically on a yearly basis. And then the number of packs hopefully will keep on increasing as well. Of course, also in Switzerland we have dead wolves. Basically, the yellow dots, they show you the legally killed wolves. We have the possibility in Switzerland to legally remove wolves. And this I'll explain to you later. And the red dots show the illegally killed wolves. And then we have, of course, lots of traffic accidents as well. So as in most countries in Switzerland as well, where wolves appear and there are sheep, unfortunately damages to livestock happen. And this is the development of livestock damages in Switzerland for the period of 1999 to 2015. Now it's difficult to give you an estimate whether it's increasing or decreasing. It's kind of fluctuating. There is no trend in how the damages are developing in Switzerland. And it is, of course, mainly to do, first of all, how many wolves we have, but the key factor is where the wolves are. Because you can see a peak in 2000, then again in 2009 and 2015. And this is basically most of the livestock damages in those years occurred in areas in the valley. Now I'll show you this on the map. So we basically have again the compartments in Switzerland, and you can see on the right the Calandre pack, the green dots. This pack, it's been there for 4 years now, and we have very little damages. Simple fact, the canton is very keen to reduce damages and supports the farmers in setting up prevention measures, and this of course helps reduce livestock damages. Then we have all the red dots in the valley, where you can see the yellow dot of the Augsburg pair. And these red dots, last year that amounted to roughly about 200 damages. And this was all due to one area where there was no livestock protection. Now the question is, that was an area that didn't see wolves for the first time. They've had wolves over the past 15 years probably. And the problem is in many regions, not just in the valley, some other regions in Switzerland as well, if there is no support by the local authorities, so if the local authorities have a basic tendency to be against the wolf, they will not help local people to take up prevention measures. And this is why in those areas we have problems with damages. So I'll quickly tell you about our livestock protection system in Switzerland. We've looked and studied which measures work, and most of the damages that occur in Switzerland over the past 20 years are on the alpine pastures during the summer. So it's about 58% of damages, and then the rest of the damages, roughly 30%, are in areas of agricultural production, so it's mainly the lowlands. And we defined two main measures that really work. So on the alpine pastures, it's clear it's the livestock guarding dogs. Without guarding dogs, it hardly ever works. And then on the area of agricultural production, it was the electric fences. So basically, alternatives for the livestock guarding dogs are difficult. We have tried fences, but the problem is in the Alps, topography is very variable, so the wolves tend to jump over the fences. Alternatives in some cases can be nighttime enclosures, and for us no alternatives of course are lambs and donkeys, because once you have a pack they become prey as well. In 2015 we had roughly about 85 Alps protected by livestock guardian dogs, and we had 200 dogs in areas in the Alps. So we use two breeds at the moment, either the Maremano abruzzese and the Montagne de Pyrénées, the BAFU. Switzerland, if you have been to Switzerland, you know it's very densely populated, and there are a lot of people for tourism, but also for other reasons that move around the Alps. So we started to have problems with our dogs when they were basically not very tolerant to tourists. And basically what we've had done, we've had a project to kind of identify which type of dog we need to be able to put on our alpine pastures so they don't pose too big a problem for tourism. One key factor is, of course, making tourists aware of the dogs, and for that we developed those panels you can see up there, the green ones. Kind of when people come into an area where we have dogs on pastures, they know there's a dog there. And we sometimes also give them alternative routes to use. And in most areas we've had a good experience with that kind of, with those measures. So basically 10% of the damages in Switzerland are on protected alpine pastures, which means 90%, so the rest, most of the damages occur where we have no protection in place. And for us it's clear that livestock guardian dogs are the key to success. It's also clear that the implementation of these measures are much easier once you have large carnivores present and when they start forming packs, because otherwise you have these individuals that keep moving and they are difficult to predict. We have determined 4 key factors to success of livestock protection in Switzerland. And one of them is adjusting the agricultural systems to wolf presence. In Switzerland, in the past, or still now, we have a big percentage of sheep that are basically roaming freely in the Alps. And of this, these sheep, of course, are very difficult to protect. It's virtually impossible in some cases. So the key is how to deal with these free roaming sheep. And then another big key point is, of course, providing advice to the people who are affected by the wolf, and of course the breeding of the livestock guardian dogs. We have a very stringent system of breeding, and dogs basically that do not fit the criteria that we need to have in place on the Alps, we don't have them in our system. And then of course another key factor is the financing. It needs to be adequate to kind of have all the measures in place. So this is the map of the green areas that show you basically which areas of Switzerland are priority regions for implementing prevention measures, which is basically most of the Alps, nearly. And we reckon that these kind of dotted areas that are still free, that are not coloured in green yet, will be coloured in green very soon when the wolves start moving around more. And basically we have the secured funding of the 2.9 million Swiss francs, which is roughly 2.5 million euros per annum to cover livestock prevention measures. The wolf management plan, I'd like to go into that quickly, but I'll be very brief because it's too detailed to give you all the information, obviously. But what's important to know, the wolf management plan, of course, is based on Swiss legislation. And there are 4 pillars in wildlife management in Swiss legislation. First one is species conservation. So you need to protect the species first before, that's the basic. You need the species there, you need to give it habitats and the right basically to disperse. Second is damage prevention. So if there are damages, we try to prevent it with adequate measures. And where there are damages, we compensate them, that's the third pillar. And then where compensation and prevention do not work or aren't enough, we allow interventions. Now the aims of the wolf management plan is, of course, as with any other species such as roe deer or wild boar, also wolves are a part of the of Switzerland, of the Alps in Switzerland. So, and they're also part of the alpine wolf population. So they have the right to exist in Switzerland. Very importantly, also the conflicts that are generated by the wolf presence in agriculture, hunting, tourism, but of course also concern people, they need to be minimized. And any life restrictions in livestock husbandry, they need to be prevented. Like I said before, damage prevention is the key for the existence of wolves in Switzerland. And of course, the management plan defines the criteria for wolf regulation. So basically, in Switzerland, since the wolf has come back, since 2000, we've had 8 wolves legally removed. Now basically, the legal removal can only be in areas where you have damages. These damages are defined in the wolf management plan. And also, you need to have established prevention measures. Without prevention measures, you cannot legally remove a wolf. That's a prerequisite, basically. Intervention is usually an exception, but it can happen. And also, you can see basically the cases. We've had more than 8 applications for wolf removal, most of them in the valley. This has several reasons, one of them being definitely also because the valley was the first canton to have wolves and is the area where wolves enter Switzerland the most. And in some of the cases, even if we gave the permits to shoot the wolf, not always was it killed the wolf, because it's basically very difficult in some areas to actually find the wolf and legally remove it. Another important fact that we have basically experienced over the past year in the canton of Graubünden, where the wolf pack is established, we've observed a change in the behavior of the wolves. So basically we have observed that lots of the juvenile wolves are becoming less shy and are going more into the villages. So this was basically all over the media, it was discussed in Parliament, and it was decided that we need to keep things keep wild things wild, which means basically the Parliament gave us the job to adapt our legislation to deal with these behavioural developments. So we now have the possibility in Switzerland for the cantons to apply for legal removal of certain wolves if they lose their natural shyness and are present during the daytime in villages. And this, of course, is not just one single wolf, but it's when we have a pack, and when this is observed over a fairly long time period. There is now the canton of Graubünden and St. Gallen, where the Calendar pack has applied for such a regulation, and the federal office has given its yes, basically. So I quickly like to give you a synthesis of the wolf monitoring in Switzerland. So the monitoring is based on the collection of signs of presence. Then we do opportunistic collection of samples for genetic analysis, and we use camera trapping where possible. So the first pack was observed in Switzerland in 2012. They reproduce yearly and the wolves are dispersing. The second pack we have in the Ticino and Moravia, and it established last year. So far we have genotyped 69 wolves in Switzerland, mainly males, and basically the number of wolves detected in Switzerland every year is increasing, and we hope that will keep increasing. The damages to livestock fluctuates really over the years. We can't say it's generally increasing, and of course it depends on the local prevention measures that are implemented. So it's always depends on how the local people and authorities react towards the wolf. For us, the livestock guardian dogs are the key to successful prevention measures, and these always need adequate financing. So our wolf management plan is based on 4 pillars: conservation, damage prevention and compensation, and of course interventions where the first 2 don't succeed as we had predicted. Interventions are only possible when damages occur, and also when you have livestock protection measures in place. And the key to the future, I think, as well, when we have packs in Switzerland, is to keep these wolves wild. And this is especially the key to the acceptance of the wolf in our cultural landscape in Switzerland. Thank you.